同事，咁就
Good morning, members. We have just made a quorum. This is the meeting of the Subcommittee on the 5th Technical Memorandum for Application of Emission Allowances in respect of specified licenses. In the first part of the meeting, we're going to listen to the views of the deputations. Let us invite the deputations and also the officials into the room. Good morning.
Hi. Ah, 智慧都唔係好似啊。嚟咗㗎啦，
嚟咗啊，因為個房喺嗰邊行。
明白明白。
可能行咗慢少少。
好，早晨。
Good morning. We have only one deputation before us, and that is the Assistant Manager of WWF Hong Kong, Mr. Koo. Three deputations have given their views, but they are not going to attend today's meeting. Today we have the DD EP, Mr. Andrew Lai, ADEP, Mr. Mok Wai Chun, PEO, EPD, Mr. Dave Ho, Mr. Donald Ng, PAS, Environment Bureau. I'd like to remind the deputation that you may use the headphone and also loudspeaker if you have the need. Channel 0 is floor, Channel 1 is Cantonese, Channel 2 is English, and Channel 3 is Putonghua. Since you are the only one speaker, you have 15 minutes. I'd like to remind you that what you say and your submission will not be protected by the Legislative Council Powers and Privileges Ordinance. Those attending the meeting in the public gallery should take note of the various security measures which is attached to the invitation letter and also put before you. Those in the public gallery may seek a copy of the guidelines for the attending the electrical meeting. After you have spoken, if you have any speaking notes, you may give it to our Secretariat for distribution to members. Mr. Koo. Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is a hard-earned opportunity to have such a long period of time for me to communicate with the officials. And this has shown a very important issue. This is about the air pollution of Hong Kong. It's about the source of pollution, an important item, yet only few members of the public can be involved in this discussion, which is the allocation of emission allowances. With regard to the paper provided by the administration to the Legislative Council, it will be very difficult for other people to participate in a discussion. The information provided by CLP is very different from Hong Kong Electric. CLP provides the breakdown or in respect of the emission allowances for gas plants, for coal plant, whereas the Hong Kong Electric only has a total. As for other groups, the government can do the calculation and breakdown, but as for the other groups, how much gas, how much coal, what is the fuel mix for a particular power company, it will be very difficult because they are not provided with lump sum. the data provided by the EP Environmental Protection Bureau is meaningless. They cannot see how the power plants operate. So the first view is very simple. First point is very simple. If there is a chance for improvement, then Hong Kong Electric should provide the breakdown of different fuels and their relative emissions. Then not only the WWF but other groups can come forward to give their views to the administration and also the Legislative Council. Another difficulty for the public to comment on this item is this. In 2019, in comparison with 2020, the cut for Hong Kong Electric is bigger in terms of emission. It is expected that the sale of electricity on Hong Kong Island will be dropped by 4%. The 2019 forecast in comparison with 2020 forecast, 2020 will face a decline of 4% in terms of sale of electricity. What is the background to that? What is the basis of calculation? The other people, the outsiders, do not know. A drop in 4% may be because of various reasons. Maybe there is a high sense of awareness of cutting power consumption. Now, but it is impossible. 4% means 400 million kilowatt hours. And that is really impossible. Now, as for the sale of electricity, therefore, in the past, might be overestimated. Therefore, in 2020, there is a rectification of the estimate, and therefore, there is such a big drop in a single year. With regard to overestimation, how big was the overestimation? That's a problem. In setting the cap on emission, there is overestimation. Therefore, the emission allowance can be achieved easily. And there is no room in the regulation to tighten the cap. But is there any room for improvement in the future? Once it is discovered that the original estimate is different from the latest information, can there be a way to rectify the arrangement that has shown the constraint of the TM? You make a request, an estimate of the coming 5 years, and if there is any departure from the estimate, it is hard to amend it. Another point of view, that's another point of view. And then there is a question. 3.2 million recyclable energy will be provided to CLP. They may come from waste treatment facilities. The recyclable energy will be provided to the power company. That's a good thing. But what about the agreement with regard to the two facilities? How do they supply power to the power companies? What is the arrangement? Can the power companies refuse accepting the power generated by the recycling renewable energy facilities? Will the price be cheaper? If time is available, I hope the officials can explain that to us. Since there are so few people attending the meeting, there can be better communication. And finally, is a suggestion. With regard to the power generation facilities, most of them have been fitted with filtering and emission reduction measures. And the further improvement will only be brought about by the fuel mix, the change in fuel mix. There's a need to change the Air Pollution Control Ordinance in the past on the reason that there was no effective way to control the emission, to reduce the emission of CO2. Therefore, CO2 was not put in the cap. Now, if it is now possible to reduce CO2, then will you also include CO2 into one of the targets of emission control? At present, if it is through the change of fuel mix to reduce emission, then there is no ground not to include CO2 into the technical memorandum. And another reason for imposing a cap on emission is it affects public health. The pollutant affects public health. And the U.S. has already confirmed that CO2 is one of the factors that harms public health. Therefore, CO2 should be included in the control scheme. That's what I have prepared to say. And I hope that the officials will explain that to us, and it will be a good thing.
Thank you. Which one from the officials would respond? Mr. Lai. Thank you, Mr. Ng, for your views. In a moment, I'll ask my colleague, Mr. Ng from the EPD, to say something about the renewable energy. According to the technical memorandum, renewable energy generated by, say, waste to the energy arrangements will be connected to the grid. So what implications there will be on the tariff, and what information can or cannot be disclosed because of commercial sensitivity will be covered by my colleague. And there's also a point about the relationship with CO2. As I've said, if we are to change CO2 emission levels, we'll have to depend on the fuel mix. So we have to look at the fuel mix and impose a cap accordingly. My colleague would also be providing supplementary information. Let me first of all make two more points. As Mr. Koo said, when we set the emission limits for the three pollutants, it seems that we are adopting different approaches for CLP vis-à-vis Hong Kong Electric. For Hong Kong Electric, we go for the only plant on Lamma Island. But for CLP, there are three different emission levels, three sets of levels for CLP, because there are three power plants run by the CLP, Long Kou Tan, Castle Peak, and Penny's Bay, one on natural gas, one on coal, and one on oil. The Director for Environmental Protection should set the emission limits with reference to the permits held by the CLP. And the CLP has been holding three permits for the three power generation plants. That's why we have three sets of emission allowances for CLP. But for Hong Kong Electric, all along it's been holding one permit only. So we have, one question. Are you making reference to the number of generation units or to the site? What's the reference? It's location-based. But rest assured, members, when we set the emission allowances of power plants, we will make reference to the three objectives: air pollution improvement, safeguard public health, and thirdly, technically feasible. So we look at the permit in question for that particular power plant and make sure that what we propose is realistic. Although for Hong Kong Electric, they have gas units, gas-fired unit, will have the whole regard of the whole plant in setting the allowances. It's not that we would provide them with looser regulations because of there's a mix of power generation units. And there's another point about the electricity consumption projections. When the government make the projections, well, according to the Air Pollution Control Ordinance, this must be done at least once every 2 years. Well, we make the projection based on the best knowledge available at the time. So if you look back, we may say that, well, at the time, if we knew certain things, we had more information, we could have tightened things up. But this has been happening all the time. If you look at the 5th TM, well, actually, there were 2 previous TMs set in previous years. Actually, the number of the units did not change. The fuel mix was basically the same. But if you look at the desulfurization device and the efficiency, and we did tighten up the emission standards in line with the development. And we would certainly go for the stringent side if there's room to tighten up things. As we have said in this paper, although the requirement is that we should do a review at least once 2 years, but if we know that there's something there's new development, we will certainly come up with a new set of emission allowances. Mr. Ng, regarding the connection to the grid of renewable energy. At present, under the agreement signed between government and the power companies, the power companies should facilitate the connection to the grid for generation of renewable energy. For these fragmented generation units, connection can be difficult because of the responsibility, the share of responsibility, and the insurance coverage. So it's difficult for renewable energy to be connected to the grid. We have been given some feedback. Later, we'll come back to this council to brief you on the feedback that we have gathered through the public consultation. And also, after 2018, we need to explore with the 2 power companies on the new schemes of control, and we will explore how facilitation can be arranged for renewable energy. As for the tariff of renewable energy, there are fit-in tariff arrangements in other countries. Such arrangements is always made to facilitate the connection arrangement. Maybe I can say something about carbon dioxide. As I explained last time, there's no feasible way to deal with the CO2. And the only way to reduce CO2 is through the fuel mix. Mr. Koo suggests that since in the existing plants, we may not be able to install more emission reduction devices or installations, so we have to do this through the fuel mix. So he suggests that we should set emission allowances as well for CO2. the most feasible approach, in our view, is to adopt the existing arrangement, and that is the best practical way to regulate coal-fired turbines. There's no better alternative for CO2. The best practical emission reduction methods still only apply to other pollutants. And maintaining the best efficiency of the turbines comes under part of the as a part of the best practices. So the most effective way, in our view, is to do it through the fuel mix, and then we can still maintain the performance in other aspects. It's said that there's a drop of 4% in consumption from 2018 to 2019. What's the assumption behind this, or the reasons behind this? Mr. Ng. Thank you, Chairman. As mentioned by Mr. Koo, for 2019-2020, there's a projected decline in power consumption. It was the assumption made 2 years ago, and this year we make a projection for 2020. So the decline is a comparison between 2019 and 2020. As I've said, we have been updating the power generation projections. So the first point is about the difference in the time of making the projection. So the second question is, why is there 4% difference between 2019 and 2020? Basically, people are more conscious of conservation of energy. That helps, but I agree with Mr. Koo that this is not the result of energy conservation and only about energy conservation. For Hong Kong Island in 2020, because of the completion of certain infrastructure projects, which would increase the demand to a small extent. So up to 2020 on Hong Kong Island, the demand for electricity would go up much more slowly. Members, Ms. Sitho, two questions. First, power consumption. You have passed certain law, such as buildings ordinance, in respect of indoor lighting. If there are modifications, they have to comply with certain requirements. We've asked the government to regulate outdoor lighting as well, and people have also carry out other energy conservation measures. If we all follow what Mr. Yu Chung Yim has done, we'll be able to save much more energy. So there's initiative on the part of the community and our people. So you have introduced new laws. You have given some money for OCs and building owners to do the audits and to introduce energy-saving devices. Have you taken these factors into account so that the emission allowances can be further reduced? That is, have you taken into side the demand side, and also the idea of a feed-in tariff is not a new idea. It's been under discussion for more than 10 years. All right, the government has heard the views expressed. So what have you done? What are the factors that have prevented you from doing this for renewable energy? and for the feed-in of recycled energy or solar energy, or you are going to generate power in your waste disposal treatment facilities, your incinerators? Is it that there's no surplus that you can fit into the grid? What are the difficulties faced by the government or the power companies? Please come clean and tell us what you see as difficulties on your part, and what are the difficulties on the part of the business sector. Mr. Lai, I'll ask my colleague to talk about the renewable energy. I very much agree with Mr. Ho concerning conservation of energy. We attach importance to conservation in our management. We have set ourselves a target of 5% reduction in power consumption on the part of the government.
We work with the two power companies to launch programs, and we also provide subsidies to encourage the public to save energy. With regard to demand management, the outcome will be reflected in the consumption of electricity. Demand management will also be incorporated into the estimate. Otherwise, CLP's growth will not just be 1%. But if you ask us to scientifically specify different targets for different sectors, we have yet to come to this stage. As for renewable energy, my colleague Mr. Ng will supplement. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Ho, for the question. In overseas countries, they have the feed-in tariff arrangement. In the consultation, we have also heard stakeholders raising the issue of feed-in tariff. That is, buying renewable energy producers may help to promote the development of renewable energy. One important factor of consideration is that if a higher price is paid for renewable energy by the power company, then that will also increase the overall tariff. With regard to renewable energy, according to present-day technology and in view of Hong Kong's physical constraints, the tariff will be higher. And we need to take that into account in drawing up feed-in tariff. Therefore, in the consultation paper, we spent quite a lot of coverage on overseas practice in respect of feed-in tariff. And with regard to the use of renewable energy, which may lead to additional tariff, we also want to assess people's views. And we have also asked the public to give their views in these areas in the consultation paper. Now, whether it is the public or stakeholders or power companies, what their views will be, we are now collating their views, and we will give you a detailed account very soon. I really want to know what do they mean by very soon or ASAP. Just give me a month or a date. And my question is not just limited to renewable energy. The administration talks about waste into energy for a very long time, and your IWMF cannot be regarded as renewable energy, but quite a lot of energy will be generated by the IWMF, the Integrated Waste Management Facility. Will you just use the power generated just for the incinerator or for the facilities on the island, Shakuchao, or will there be additional energy to be put on the grid? With regard to timetable, on the 3rd of November, said the Speaker, there would be, on the 23rd of November, there will be a meeting of the EP panel, and we will update you on the things we have done. As for the IWMF, if there is excess energy, it will be put on the grid. Next, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. Paragraph 4 says that the administration is studying the possibility of using renewable energy and enhance its efforts in energy saving. Can a specific plan be provided? Can targets be set so that people know these are concrete statements rather than empty words? Now you ask other people to make arrangement for energy saving, you will have to do it through the law. And that will only be relevant for new buildings through the buildings ordinance. I want to ask the administration with regard to public facilities to be built by the government. There will be many big projects. With regard to the new government buildings or facilities, how will they make use of renewable energy, or how will they save energy? Are there any targets set for these new infrastructure and government buildings and government facilities so that the government will take the lead in energy saving and in using renewable energy?
The
third question is this. With regard to this technical memorandum, it looks at three things. FUMIX, energy-saving measures, can further enhance and reduction in emission will further enhance the effectiveness of reducing emission. But we have not seen any encouragement for them to do so. Now you have a formula. You set targets, these emission targets.
So
the total capacity, and total capacity is also one of the variables. Well, I don't know what is the approach, but if the two power companies, in respect of energy saving, are effective, then they should be given an incentive so as to make use of energy, adopting energy-saving measures. Now, the fact is that if everybody consumes less electricity, they will have less business. Now, say for HEC, if the power consumption is reduced by 4%, that will substantially reduce emission. So in terms of energy saving measures, can an incentive be given so as to encourage the power companies to save energy? Mr. Lai. May I thank Mr. Wu for his three questions. As for promoting renewable energy and policy or measures to encourage the power companies to save energy, and my colleagues will respond to that. I will speak on the overall energy saving policy of the government, in particular the building, the measures in respect of buildings. Now, the Environment Bureau issued the 2015-2025 policy paper. 2025 is the target year. In that year, the energy energy intensity will be reduced by 45%. That's very aggressive. Government departments will take the lead, of course, and set a good example. We have to comply with the BEAM standard. we have to achieve certain energy saving. This is a basic requirement. That's for government buildings. We also encourage the private sector to achieve green building targets. Government buildings also comply. As for the energy efficiency building ordinance with regard to lighting and also lifts, we have tightened the energy efficiency requirements. 90% of the energy are spent on buildings. So in terms of energy efficiency, we'll put on more efforts. As for setting the emission cap, the formula seems not to have included energy saving. Now, with regard to the formula, we look at the efficiency and capacity of the units and also future demand. If energy saving is effective, then it will be reflected in the demand. As for the plus or minus side of the formula, they deal with renewable energy, sometimes more, sometimes less in terms of supply of renewable energy. And therefore, we add this to deal with their variables. Maybe Mr. can speak on renewable energy. Mr. Wu, as far as I understand, is concerned about the promotion of energy saving. Just now, Mr. Lai has already spoken on the overall government policy on enhancing efforts on promoting energy-saving measures. As for the two power companies, under the present Scheme Control Agreement, or SCA, we have measures to encourage power companies to save energy. Say they have to do a certain number of energy audits for their clients. And if they reach certain energy-saving markets after energy auditing, there will be additional rewards for the clients. These two measures are not enough. How can we ask the power companies to do more in terms of energy saving? More can be done. We have heard a lot of suggestions. The two power companies who are stakeholders should put in more efforts in promoting energy saving. And some arrangement should be made under the SCA to ask them to do more. And that is a very important direction in respect of reviewing the SCA. Any questions from members in respect of the speech by the presentation by Mr. Koo? If not, then Mr. Koo, you may now leave. Thank you very much. Mr. Ho, you have raised your hand. I have a follow-up. I give the floor to Ms. Ho, and then followed by Mr. Wu. Ms. Ho, please. Mr. Chairman, I just want to follow up a point in respect of power generation by the IWMF. There is an arrangement for that. So what exactly is the arrangement? Now, if the power companies are to buy renewable energy, that will affect tariff. What is the arrangement between the IWMF and the power companies if so what is the arrangement? Will that affect the tariff with regard to the sale of renewable energy to the grid? I said that assuming that the facility generates power for itself. I'm talking about the government incinerator, not renewable energy. Well, it's the same facility. It's just the same facility. your government incinerator, you claim that it is a renewable energy, a source of renewable energy. The only renewable energy facility is the incinerator. All right. If there is excess power, it will be put on the grid. That's my understanding. As for the details, we don't have the information in hand. Can you provide us with further information? If my understanding is correct, Ms. Ho's question is on the sludge facility. Is it the one you refer to? No, the one you burned 3,000 tons per day. 3 incinerators, 3 landfills, 1 incinerators. That's a big issue. Well, our colleagues are not responsible for that facility. You need to provide us further information. It's a Sekuchao incinerator. The energy, apart from being used to burn up the refuse, will be sold to the power companies. At what price will you sell the electricity to the power companies? What is the arrangement with the power generators?
In the future, this can be a reference for the feed-in tariff of renewable energy. Mr. Wu Chi-wei, the officials said that there's a blueprint on energy from the PWSC submission. We don't have any information on the parameters of energy saving. We are told that this building will use certain energy saving installations and so on and so forth. But it's not really about setting the baseline, doing the assessment, and then new buildings would achieve a certain degree of saving. And the public will understand how the government go about it and implement the blueprint. So I would like to know whether for public works project, will the EPD be invited by the government to do an audit? And then you can inform the public that if all the proposed measures are implemented, you'll be able to meet the objectives under the blueprint. Mr. Lai, thank you, Mr. Wu, for your question. For new government buildings, in respect of green facilities and energy saving, we have certain requirements. We have made reference to the guidelines set under BIM Plus. I can get more information from my colleague after the meeting so that we know that the Architectural Services Department and the Buildings Department will be doing to reflect such aspirations of green groups. So in other words, EPD will not be carrying out any energy audit. And you rely on the BIM Plus guidelines as the executive tool. Mr. Lai, I don't have any information on this. The Environmental Bureaus sets the policy framework. We set the basic requirements for new government departments, new government buildings. They would have to comply with certain requirements in the planning stage and in the construction phase. As regards whether for individual projects they have carried out any audit or not, or I'll have to find more information from my colleagues before I can respond. For feed-in tariff, what about the smart meter to save energy and also to reduce tariff payment if a feed-in is required. Are you relying on the two power companies in implementing the so-called smart grid arrangement, or are you going to provide them with some support to apply this smart grid arrangement widely, and then people will understand more their consumption pattern, and they will be making informed choices about things such as electrical appliances they use. On the smart meter proposal, the power companies have conducted some pilot schemes. They have been assessing whether smart meters can help people understand their consumption profile and as a result achieve saving. We all know that if we are to install smart meters, there's a capital cost and it may have an impact on tariff. But we need to know first whether the smart meters can help people to save energy and what's the cost-benefit analysis. So the power companies are doing some assessment. We'll assess the findings before we decide whether this should be applied more extensively. And of course, smart meters are related to the issue of whether feed-in tariffs should be set. Well, what's the role of a government? Are you only a passive stakeholder and you'll just be informed of the progress? Well, smart meters means that we have to replace the existing meters, and there's a big capital cost. The government is the authority to approve it. Both power companies doing it. I understand the CLP is doing it, but what about Hong Kong Electric? Well, your understanding is correct. The main player now is CLP. So the government has not conducted any study into the application of smart meters. And has the CLP got a timetable so that they can submit the findings to you? Well, it's not that the government has no role to play in smart meters. We have to approve proposals in this regard. And we have to make sure and assess and make sure whether smart meters can achieve energy saving goals. We'll have to assess, we have to look into the findings and the data gathered by the power companies. My question is about whether the government has conducted any basic research. I know you are the approval authority. Well, we have looked at other countries and how they have been able to achieve through smart meters. In some places, well, the outcome is not as good as expected. And of course, it has a certain relationship with tariff. Members, do you have other policy questions on the technical memorandum? Since the government has looked into the effectiveness or efficiency of smart meters, can we be given some relevant information? Yes. All right. Let's now let's have a look at the clauses. We have the Chinese version as scrutinized first. Well, this is technical. So I will be explaining what the clauses are, but not just, and I will not just read it out. Well, this technical memorandum is made in accordance with Section 37B1 of the ordinance, and in the preamble, it's cited as it's made under 26G. Okay, preliminary is under section 26 of the ordinance, and section 37 is about the commencement. We have to give the power company 4 years before the technical memorandum comes into effect. Let's look at 1.2, paragraph 1.2. From the 1st of January 2020, in each emission year, in respect of every plant, there will be a specified license, and then we'll, in respect of the three pollutants, NOx, SO2, and RSPs, there will be allowances set for the pollutants. And that's also since we already have the 4th technical memorandum. When this 5th technical memorandum comes in effect, the 4th technical memorandum will lapse, will be superseded. So that's 1.2. 1.3, interpretation. I want to highlight a few terms for members' understanding. Electricity generation for local consumption. We only take into account the electricity generated for local consumption. If it's for export, directly or indirectly, such a electricity generation will not be taken into account. And then, please also refer to the emission year. I have a question. Do we export electricity? We barely have sufficient for ourselves. We're present. CLP exports, if I remember correctly, electricity to Circle. Our calculations do not take this into account. So the power company will have to work out its own way to make it possible. But I understand the export only takes up a very small portion of the power they generate. Emission year is important. It has the same meaning as in the ordinance. The emission year starts from the 1st of January. And Mr. Koo asked why HEC, Hong Kong Electric, has a mix of different generation units, and we give them one allowance, one unified allowance, but there are different allowances for CLP units. But you can see that under ABCD, allocation of emission allowances, they refer to different locations, the addresses. And then next, renewable energy system includes solar, wind, biomass, hydro, tidal wave, geothermal, and energy from waste. So waste to energy is covered. Energy from waste is covered. I'll be referring members to the formula in due course. So these are the important terms under interpretation. Mr. Ho, on the same question of export. When I first saw it, I asked myself, well, are we really exporting electricity? Circle is, of course, close to Hong Kong. But if the electricity is not consumed locally, but the emission will be discharged locally, should there be an agreement to come up with the total emissions for Hong Kong and Circle and neighboring areas, so that we will not be emitting excessive pollutants. So if you do discount the export, and the emission will not be ideal. Perhaps I can explain. The discount doesn't mean that the emissions will be discounted. When we set the allowances, it's not that we are going to give them more allowances because of the export side. We are saying that that will be disregarded. They will have to live within the allowances as if there's no export. But that's different.
兩間電力公司本地嗰個電力需求嚟計。
We look at the local consumption. Whether they have excess capacity for export is a matter for them. Then I think the problem is solved.
第二個部分嗰度咧，其實就係講一啲
Part 2 for all the permits, we set specific allowances, emission allowances. Let me first of all talk about the overall arrangement. First, in respect of every power company, we will estimate how much renewable energy will be generated. We estimate the maximum amount of generation.
然之後再睇下。
Then we look at the total generation capacity of the power plants, assuming that they have that much renewable energy. Then there will be an amount basing on the fuel mix, basing on emission control measures, and then set a cap on the emission allowed. And then we will look at the actual renewable energy and make an adjustment. Say, if they have made use of less renewable energy, then we will add more to the emission allowance. If they've made use of more renewable energy, then we will reduce the emission allowance. As for Lama, they generate about 2 gigawatt hours from renewable energy. That's in Table A. As for Long Kutan or Black Point, there is no renewable energy portion. If they have renewable energy, then they should replace the coal-fired power plant, coal-fired power generator. But Black Point is a coal-fired power generator, so we don't have the deduction. As for Castle Peak Power Station, we have the reduction arrangement. As for Penny's Bay, concerning the peak consumption, is to deal with peak consumption hours. Any questions with that? Mr. Wu, I will have a question on the formula. Well, I just want to clarify this. With regard to renewable energy, there is a fixed amount in the TM. Now you want to encourage the power companies to increase the supply of renewable energy. If you look at this formula, there is no incentive for them to increase the supply of renewable energy. When they increase renewable energy supply, then the emission allowance will be cut according to the amount of renewable energy increased. So if they do more, then in terms of using renewable energy, then the cap on them will be tightened. So what incentive is there for them to use more renewable energy? Now CLP has room to sell energy to share coal. Now it is put under the total emission cap. if there is an increase in renewable energy, then CLP may be able to sell more of its excess energy across the border. That may be an incentive. So when you consider the formula, then there should be, first of all, a basic amount to be supplied in terms of renewable energy, and then the emission allowance can be increased with the increase in the use of renewable energy so that they will have the incentive to invest in renewable energy. Mr. Mok. Well, I look at it from the point of view of emission control. Now, if we follow the law's spirit, the emission allowance should be cut and cut and cut if there is any room to do so. In order to encourage the use of renewable energy, something will have to be done outside the TM. They can be encouraged to use more renewable energy or supply more renewable energy. But in terms of the emission allowance, we should tighten it as far as possible. Mr. Wu. Yes, I understand your point. I understand the requirement of the TM. I am concerned about the built-in mechanism under the TM. There is no element to provide incentive for the power plant to invest more in renewable energy or to take on board renewable energy supplied from other generators, for example, the government incinerator. Now at present, with the presence of the markets, they can buy energy from other generators or other producers. But the TM doesn't provide this incentive. Now we want more renewable energy used, but therefore the TM will be tightened. Now the TM is reviewed every 3 or 5 years. My suggestion is that if there is an increase in the supply of renewable energy, more room should be allowed to the power companies. I want to rephrase Mr. Wu's question. I understand that the TM will not consider providing incentives to power companies to increase the supply of renewable energy, but on other levels or policy levels, is there any incentive to encourage the power companies to increase the supply of renewable energy? Mr. Lai. Yes, I understand the concern of Chairman and Mr. Wu. Now your conclusion is right. The TM deals with tightening the allowance so as to improve air quality. To encourage the use of renewable energy mechanisms outside the TM will be the solution. Say the SCA will have a higher permitted rate of return. Say, for example, 9% for using fuel and then 11% for using renewable energy. So there is added incentive to encourage the power companies to invest in renewable energy generation. As for supply of renewable energy from diverge sources, we are now collecting views from the public. Yes, Mr. Mok, please continue to take us through the memorandum. 2.2. is in respect of the arrangement for, or rather the above are for existing permit holders. As for 2.2 is for new electricity works. Now, if they appear after the new TM is enacted, then we will have this to deal with the new electricity works. I will not explain in detail in respect of the formula because it is similar to those above. Mr. Wu. Now, concerning the 300 MW, what is the basis for that? In Hong Kong, the overall power consumption is not too big. A 300 megawatt unit is a standard unit. If there is and it's not realistic to suddenly increase the supply of electricity in a very substantial manner. Every 2 years, we conduct a review of the TM. Later, I will explain that. It is really impossible to see a substantial demand in electricity, thereby requiring a much bigger unit. Can they provide information on the capacity of each unit? I think your argument is that you follow the existing size of the generation units. Can you provide us information? Yes, we can. Mr. Mok, please go on. Please take us through the TM. Paragraph 2.3. It spells out that the authority shall make the allocation of emission allowances for each type of specified pollutant in relation to each specified license. That's the intention of the TM. Para 2.4 is operational. For the purpose of determination of quantity of emission allowances, the aggregate of the total net sent-out electricity output from renewable energy system in emission is to be rounded up to the next whole number. 2.5 is also in respect of rounding up, a provision in terms of rounding up the number if it is not a whole number. These are minor issues. Yes. Rounding up to the next whole number. Is it in terms of millions or in terms of tens of millions? Say, for example, 3.5 tons, then it will be 4 tons. 1,000.2, then it will become 1,001. It's just a minor rounding up. Yes, I want to ask about it because it says that they round up to the next whole number. But from the point of view of whole number, the difference can be very big. It depends on the significant number. It can be 5%, it can be 10%. If you look at the schedule, or rather, if you look at the table, 2.1a, apart from ton, the unit which is ton, many numbers are in terms of 3,000 something, 6,000 something, 10,000 something. Let us take Castle Peak Power Station, nitrogen oxide 10844. If the sum after calculation is 10844.2, then it will be rounded up to 108.45. So the number after the decimal point will be rounded up. Okay. What is your unit? Ton. Okay, ton. Mr. Mok, please go on. Paragraph 2.6. It spells out that unless otherwise provided or required in ordinance or in subsidiary legislation, the authority shall allocate to each specified license the respective quantity of emission allowances set out or determined in accordance with this technical memorandum for each and every emission year from the 1st of January 2020. That is what the whole technical memorandum is to do. 2.7. At the EA panel, we explained that In 2016, there will be a review on this fifth technical memorandum. The Secretary, therefore, shall review in 2016 the quantity of emission allowances for each type of specified pollutant for each specified license set out or determined in accordance with this TM after the commencement of this TM. So next year, we'll conduct a review and we'll come back to the Council. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, please. Next year, there will be a review on the TM, and they will come back to report to us. The discussion of this committee has touched on CO2 several times. So next year, in conducting a review on the TM, will you consider CO2? Chairman, we cannot exclude any possibility, but I want to explain to members that according to the law, the review has to be undertaken in certain ways. The law allows us to review NO2, NOx, SO2, and particulates. This is the impediment. And the biggest of all is that in respect of CO2, there is no way to reduce CO2 emission or to collect CO2, and we can only do so. We can only reduce CO2 by the fuel mix. So, in consider the TM, we have already taken into account the fuel mix, and therefore we can set the emission allowance. So we have already taken that into account. Any further questions on this TM? If not, then I hope that members and also the officials will pay attention to this.
I'll move a motion tomorrow on the 18th of November to extend the scrutiny period to the 16th of December, and the date of making a report to the House Committee will be the 4th of December. So amendments, if any, will have to be proposed by the 9th of December. The government is going to provide additional information papers. So for the moment, I've reserved a tentative date, and that is 23rd of November, a Monday, from 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. I'll inform members whether we will have to convene that further meeting in due course. Members are concerned about fuel mix, carbon dioxide, and air pollution generally. When we make a report, submit a report to the House Committee on this technical memorandum, should we or do any members wish to speak in the Council meeting? When the motion is discussed. If so, please let me know now so that I can make an application to the House Committee Chairman. I'm going to speak at the Council meeting. So I would I will be making an application as chairman of the subcommittee. All right, thank you. If there's no other business, meeting's adjourned. I thank you for coming, government officials and members.